Hello, thank you so much for staying on the AM show. It's now time to talk education. And you know, one of the major policies of this government is the free senior high school policy. A lot have lauded the initiative, and over time, people criticized it. Criticized government even for putting too much focus and attention on free senior high school at the expense of junior high and primary school education. This morning we're going to be having a conversation because we understand that there's a new curriculum for primary schools for 2022. Remember the issue of the new curriculum that was introduced and the lack of textbooks. Now the question is, why are we seeing a new one? What's happened to the old one? And why are we still not having even textbooks for the old one? We'll be having that conversation shortly. There's also the bit about concerns by a think tank about GES and the Ministry of Education and how they think the Ministry of Education is gradually sidelining the GES. We'll be having all that here on the AM show. I've been joined by Peter Anti. He's Executive Director for the Institute for Education Studies. Divine Ekpe is Research Fellow for Africa Education Watch. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for your time.
Good morning.
Let me start with you, Mr. Anti. You have some concerns about the GES and the Ministry of Education and how you think that the Ministry of Education, I beg your pardon, may be overstepping its boundaries when it comes to the work of the GES. Tell us more.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I think we raised that issue in the midst of the challenge that we had with the World Bank Gallup project, that it came out clearly that the Ghana Education Service, the Director General was not aware of the number of teachers that have been trained. And we sought to not to talk about the training program or the amount or the controversy around how much have gone into it, because we didn't want to go into that area. We sought to look at a trend of incidents that have occurred in the education sector that seems to suggest that the ministry and the Ghana Education Service seems not to be working together as they used to. They are supposed to. And we listed examples like the conduct of the National Standardized Test, where we had documents that indicated that the ministry had a certain plan, whereas the Ghana Education Service also had a certain plan. And we saw that the Ghana Education Service was in favor of relaxing the processes instead of rushing it through as demanded by the ministry. And at the end of the day, we also saw what happened with the NST. So those were the incidents that we were recapping, and we tried to show that trend. We also cited the example of NAGRAT that came out forcefully some few weeks ago to indicate that they suspect that the ministry is planning to recruit headmasters for the newly STEM schools. We were able to get documents to that effect, that the policy, there was a plan to that effect. But then when it was raised at that time, the deputy minister came to say that it wasn't true. But that activity of recruiting personnel in the education service is truly the duty of the Ghana Education Service. So you will see that there's been instances where the mandates of the Ghana Education Service enshrined in law seems to be taken over by the Ministry of Education, that is supposed to have an oversight responsibility about how the various agencies under the ministry are supposed to operate. So those were the issues that we felt we should bring to the attention of the people, and especially of the appointing authority, because implementation is key to policy success. So we were having serious implementation challenges, and we felt that it was because of that kind of non-coordination between the ministry and the Ghana Education Service, and that anybody who is in charge of the ministry should show leadership, and the other people, I mean the president and the leadership of of this government should call the leadership of the two institutions to order so that the investment that we are making in the education sector will be able to realize
all right.
their good returns.
But Mr. Anti, these concerns that you raised, have you reached out to any of these bodies for a response?
Yes. I think we had an interaction with the PRO. He sought to give certain explanations.
PRO of what? The GES? Hold on, sir. Sorry, the PRO.
Yeah. I mean the Ministry of Education.
Okay.
Of course, all the incidents that we cited in our release about 2 weeks ago were things that have happened. All that he sought to do was to explain why certain activities have been undertaken without reports to the Ghana Education Service. And we felt that we've been able to bring a lot of attention to it, and going forward, we are keenly following the activities in the sector to see whether there will be this kind of communication or an attempt to sabotage the Ghana Education Service in any of the other activities that they are supposed to undertake. And when we pick such signals, it will determine the next action that we would want to take.
Let me hear from Divine on this same matter. Divine, do you also get a sense that the ministry is overstepping and doing what is the strict responsibility of the Ghana Education Service? Hello, Divine? All right, I'm told we just lost Divine. So let's move on to the other focus areas for our discussion. Let's talk about the new curriculum, because we've seen a document which says that there's a new curriculum for the 2022 year for basic schools. According to the National Association or National Council for Curriculum and Assessment, the difference between this and the existing curriculum is that the existing curriculum includes content overload and an inability of the assessment system to provide sufficient data to help fashion improvement in teaching and learning. In the new curriculum, there is a shift away from the overloaded subject curriculum towards a reduced overload by promoting conceptual understanding. Okay, so first off, let me just find out from you, if this has come to your notice. We've been trying to reach the GES. We're yet to receive a response. Is this a new curriculum, or it is the existing curriculum was introduced, for which textbooks are yet to be received?
Oh, okay, thank you. Let me state this. I have not seen the document that you are referring to.
Okay.
What I know is that we started a series of curriculum reviews over the years, and we started with the basic school, KG to basic 6, and that was around 2019. And at that level, what we did was to change the curriculum from what used to be the objective-based curriculum to a standard-based curriculum. So we have changed that curriculum for almost 3 years now, and that is the curriculum that we said, or we have continuously said, that it does not have the needed textbooks, because the document that came with what we call the teacher's guide. And the teacher's guide is just a framework that is supposed to guide the teachers in what they are supposed to teach. But it is supposed to also come with a textbook that is supposed to be used during the teaching and learning process, and that is not available. So that is the curriculum for the basic school. And for the basic school, this is from KG to basic 6. Then earlier this year, we implemented another curriculum at the junior high school level, or we started the implementation. That curriculum is called the Common Core Curriculum or Common Core Program. That document is supposed to be for GHS 1 to GHS 3. So we have the Common Core, which is being implemented now for GHS 1 to GHS 3. And that document came with the teacher's guide and the learner's guide. So you will see that there's a shift from the standard base where we had only the teacher's guide. I think the developers now learned a little lesson from the implementation challenges they had with the standard base. So with the Common Core, there is a teacher's guide and there's a learner's guide. I wouldn't want to talk much about it because there's an evaluation going on, and maybe within next month, we would release our report on what we found so much. Then what is about to happen is the curriculum for the senior high schools. So we have changed the basic school up to basic 6. We have started with junior high school. Then technically, you wouldn't want to have this, the same document that the senior high schools are using. So there is going to be a reform or review of the senior high school curriculum, which I think they are starting the process, the process to write the curriculum somewhere next week. So that is what is happening. So I'm not aware of a new curriculum for the basic school this year. This year, there's not been, so far as I know, there's not been any talk about a new curriculum for the basic schools. What we have done this year was to introduce the Common Core for the junior high schools. And then the ministry and the Ghana Education Service, especially NACA, is working on producing a document that will be the curriculum for the senior high schools. And I think the process starts next week.
So looking at what's happened in the education sector since this government assumed office, I don't know what the proper practice is when you introduce a new system or a new curriculum into the education system. How much time should you give yourself before you begin to make further changes or adjustments? Because it appears that we are on an experimentation drive.
All right. For me, I think everybody knows my position on these reforms. I think it is needed. The last time we did a comprehensive reform in terms of curriculum at the pre-tertiary level, it goes back to somewhere 2008. And then I think we did, by 2011, 2012, we did some innovations here and there to the curriculum. We have not had a comprehensive overhaul of the curriculum for almost like 10 years now. And that is problematic because the curriculum dictates what you teach your kids. And as the world changes, you will need to also adapt your document, your educational system to suit what the world demands at that point in time. So technically or ideally, you will see that curriculums are reviewed after it has run its full course. And in an educational system, you are looking at between 4 to 5 years, you need to review the curriculum. Okay. So for the review and the reforms that we are doing, they are needed to be able to ensure that the graduates that will come out from the system are graduates that will fit into the current trend in the global space. What we have not been able to do well, and that has created a lot of challenges for us, is our ability to adapt, to stay true to the timelines that we have and then do proper implementation. So if we had timelines, and I talk about timelines because if we had timelines, we would know that after releasing the curriculum for the basic schools, the standard base, we had about 2-3 months to also work on the textbooks. For the inability of the system to produce textbooks for the schools in the public sector means that we did not follow the timelines. And what this leads to is that we will not be able to get the benefits of the actual goals and aims of the curriculum that we are supposed to get. So at the end of the day, we have a nice document that we have out there, but we have implementation challenges because we are not able to meet the timelines. And because of that, we're not able to implement the document as we are supposed to implement it. So for the changes and the reviews, I think we are doing the right thing, but the problem is really the implementation and our ability to stay true to our timelines.
We've been joined by Divine Pear again. Divine, thank you for reconnecting. While you were away, we were talking about the new curriculum introduced by the Ghana Education Service for kindergarten and primary schools. And we still don't have textbooks. Teachers are concerned. Parents are concerned. And I'll pose the question I posed to Peter to you too. Are we doing the right thing when it comes to the implementation of our curriculum? Or would you agree with those who say that we appear to be experimenting with any and everything at the expense of the future of our kids?
Yeah, thank you, Benis. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Can you please? All right, thank you. And good morning to viewers. Yes, rightly, I agree with Peter that we need the curriculum. The curriculum is rightly needed, given the fact that it's been over a decade that we reviewed our curriculum. But by international practices, we're supposed to review the curriculum every 5 years. Even if you are not going to change the entire curriculum, at least you review it every 5 years. I don't know if my network is smooth. It appears
We can
to be
hear
breaking.
you. We can hear you, Divine.
All right.
Please.
Okay. So by international practice, it must be reviewed every 5 years, even if you are not going to make cause any major input into it. So yes, we are okay with the curriculum that have been reviewed and then also the new inputs that are into it, because if you look at it, it cuts across cutting issues worldwide. We're talking about issues of climate change. We're talking about the issues of gender related issue, equality and equity. So cross-cutting issues are embedded in the new curriculum. We're talking about skills that are needed in the 21st century, we're talking about communication skill, creativity skill, critical thinking, and then collaboration. So the curriculum is very good and nobody can discount the goodness of it. It's very okay. It is the implementation that we are getting wrong. And I believe strongly, ideally, we shouldn't have been in a hurry to implement the curriculum if all things were not rightly in place. While we may have the curriculum, we can take the implementation gradually and ensure that we start on a good note. But as it stands right now, our starting has been very faulty, whereby we have started the curriculum without the necessary tools that teachers will need for the effective implementation of the curriculum. As I always say, every trained teacher will note that the textbook is very critical in aiding his or her teaching and learning. And if you are a trained teacher, professional teacher, you have known that in preparing your lesson for teaching, your first point of consultation should be the curriculum, and then after the curriculum, the textbooks. So after the textbook, you can look for any other material to reference. So where we have the case that teachers have the curriculum, but they don't have the textbook that mainly contains the content, then it becomes a problem. Mind you, teachers need both content skills and then pedagogical skills for effective delivery. So when you are going through training, you are taught the content of mathematics, what are in the various curriculum, what are in the mathematics, what are in the English, what are in the science. Then after that, you spend another year learning the methodology, that's the pedagogy, how to teach those contents. So you may have the skill, but if what you need to help you for the content, to apply the pedagogy to the content to be taught is not available, then it's actually hampered effective delivery of teaching and learning in a classroom. And our research has always showed that teachers are indeed struggling to implement the curriculum effectively in their classrooms. Some would have to resort to the internet to be browsing for material to use. And then some will also have to be copying some of the old tests from the old textbooks that are available. They have to be copying notes from it onto the Blackboard for the student. And by the time they finish copying those content onto the the Blackboard, tells you times is already running. Even prior to the introduction of the new curriculum, textbook, the full complement, what we need to also understand that every student must have the 3 full core textbooks. That's the ratio. So the ratio is 3:1. The 3 textbook is to 1 pupil in a classroom. So prior to the introduction of new curriculum, it was only 20% of students that were having the full complement of the core textbooks that they needed. So even we want to say, as some people will argue that some of the changes that we have made in the new curriculum are not too different from the old one, and therefore teachers can still resort to some of the content from the old textbooks. We still have to make the case that not all schools even have the full complement of the old textbooks even before encouraging teachers to resort to that. So we have peculiar issue, and we must treat it as something that is urgent. And where we are having timelines and we are still missing the timelines, that is where the problem is. We're giving March, and then now we are in June. Now the next date is September. September is not far away. So what at all are we doing to ensure that teachers have what they need to implement the curriculum effectively?
Okay.
Some will say we have distributed the resource pack to teachers, and I don't want us to be making that argument, because the resource pack, it concerns little to aid effective teaching and learning. If you take just the English aspect of the resource pack, the English aspect contains only 54 pages. Now, these 54 pages contain rationale of the curriculum, the objective, and others, and then also give sample of lesson plan on English in class 1, class 2, class 3, up to class 6. Now, 54 pages is not enough to treat in-depth content that students are supposed to learn from classes 1 to classes 6. You can't do that. Even the curriculum for class 1 alone is more than half of the English. It's like 25 pages. So if you take the resource pack, which has only 54 pages, it hasn't treated the issues discussed in the curriculum in depth. So we rely on the resource pack.
Okay, so you've spoken about how the textbooks help teachers to explain or teach according to the curriculum. But let's talk about the children themselves. Many of us who went to school usually will rely on our textbooks to do extra work at home, revise what we've been taught in school. Do you think it's fair to examine these kids when we haven't given them these textbooks to help them study properly? Do you think that it's even fair enough for us to be talking about examining them?
All right, for examination, it depends on how you approach it or you take it. Because for assessment in education, it is always needed. We have what you call assessment for learning, assessment as learning, assessment of learning. So assessment for learning is what we call, teachers will call the diagnostic assessment. Before you start your teaching, you do a little bit of assessment. And we must not understand assessment necessarily like a test where the student will take a pen and a pencil to write something, questions on a question paper and then answer in a paper. No. So it can be even oral assessment. So the teacher will assess the student to understand the student level of appreciation of that topic before the teacher builds on that particular thing. That's the assessment for learning. Then assessment as learning. That is, as the learning is ongoing, the teacher is assessing the student to appreciate also the level of the student's understanding of what he or she is teaching. And then the last one is the assessment of learning. Now the teacher, after teaching, now evaluates the student or assesses the student to see whether that child has appreciated what has been taught. So for assessment, we will not have to predicate it on the availability of textbooks. It's always needed, and no matter what, whether you have textbook, whether you have textbook or not, once you have taught something or you are in a teaching process, or even before you have to teach, you always have to assess your student. But when we're talking about a summative assessment where you make a high-stake decision on the assessment, like BEC, like WASSCE, like the national standard assessment that we have just written, that is a high-stake examination. So once you are going to make a high-stake assessment on what you've given to the student, you are going to make a decision on something like that, then it's very important that you make available what the student needs to be able to prepare for their assessment, so that when you are assessing the child and the outcome, you know that, look, the outcome is a true reflection of what the child has given out. But when you have not made available what is needed for effective teaching and learning, and then you have assessed the child, and then your interpretation of that assessment data can be very faulty because you have not made available what is needed for effective teaching and learning, and the child has not performed well. You may think that probably is because the child hasn't done well, and therefore you need this remedial intervention for the child. But it could mostly also be because the child and the teachers do not have what they need for the effective teaching and learning to take place. So for high-stake assessment like national standard assessments, it's very important that we make available what teachers need for them to teach very well. You know, it's when we're talking about this new curriculum, the focus should not necessarily be on only the textbook, but other the ancillaries like posters, the charts that teachers need, the workbooks that the teachers need must accompany equally the textbooks. But when you don't even have the test where you are asking of the ancillaries,
Right.
it's very difficult.
Okay.
So these are all needed for the teachers to prepare the students so that when we are carrying out the assessment, that is the high-stake assessment, as we have implemented, piloted the first phase by having for only class 4. Understanding is that by this year, we should scale it up to classes 4 and 6. It's very important that you make available
all right, Divine,
for them to prepare for the high.
Okay. Let me come to you, Mr. Anti. So there are those who are painfully withdrawing their children from public schools to private schools because of some of these issues, the lack of textbooks and other things affecting teaching and learning. Just like many state-owned or public institutions, there appears to be some sort of mismanagement or lack of proper, let me put it that way, lack of proper management. And so over time, privately owned institutions appear to be doing better. And like we saw with Ghana Telecom and other public institutions, eventually we sell them off. Are you confident that we can put the public school system back on the track it used to be 40, 50 years ago, where people would even pull out their children from private schools to public schools because they were offering the best education at that time? Are we on track to doing that? Or if we aren't careful, we're going to see a more devastating impact of the decisions we are making today?
I think one of the ways that we bridge the gap of inequality in any society is through education. So some of us are passionate about education because we see it as a powerful tool to bridge the gap of inequality. What we have succeeded in doing in this country is to use education, especially at the basic level, to widen the gap of inequality. And it is evident in the way we have run our public basic schools. We are talking about textbooks now. As we are discussing this, it is known that students in private basic schools have access to textbooks. Teachers in private basic schools are teaching the students with textbooks. The difficulty is that in public basic schools, it is the duty of the government to provide the textbooks for the children. And in as much as we have not been able to do that, we are widening the gap of inequality. And that is why you said that most people are taking their awards away from public schools. I've done a school choice survey for an international organization before, and it came out clearly that even though private schools charge higher fees and our public basic school seems to be free, parents, even those with lower income, still would want to struggle and take the awards to private basic schools instead of the public that seem to be free. And the reason is simply that they know that when it comes to the delivery of quality education that can secure the future of their children, that is not what is done in most of our public basic schools. They lack the amenities, they lack the resources, they lack the commitment, they lack the supervision, they lack everything that needs to be in place to ensure that you are delivering quality education for the kids. So by our own arrangement, we are widening the gap of inequality, especially at the basic level, because one, we have not been committed to provide the needed resources that the kids need and the teachers need to be able to function well. And I don't think that this is going to stop any time, any moment from now. I'm hoping that we will get a leadership at the education front that will not be so much fixated with secondary education, but will think about the foundation of our education. You see, you can do all the investment at the tertiary level, you can do all the investment at the secondary level, but the products that feed into these two levels of education are those that are being prepared at the basic level. So you cannot have a very shambolic basic education system, a basic education system that does not give its products the needed skills and knowledge that they need, and think that when they graduate to the secondary level, they will be able to perform magic. And that is what we are having now. Recently, you heard the minister complaining that the secondary schools are picking students that are doing well. I was thinking that he would say that what can we do as a country to fix the challenges at the basic level so that the students who graduate from the basic level would also be doing well. We are not doing any good thing at the basic level. And if my expectation is that this is going to end anytime soon, I doubt, because I've not seen any commitment from authorities that shows that we are going to change the way we are handling our basic education in Ghana. It is very painful. And we talk about these things and a lot of attention is not given because, as I said, at the basic level, all of us, including myself, are making sure that our kids get the best of education. So we take our kids to the private schools where we think that the resources are there, the commitment is there, the supervision is there. And because of that, we are all quiet about the things that are happening in our basic education schools across the length and breadth of the country. But if you delve into it, I can tell you that it is nothing to write home about. We are just doing anything to represent teaching and learning, doing anything to represent delivering education. And we are not equipping these students, these kids in public basic schools enough to be able to compete with their colleagues that attend the private schools. And this is not going to change anytime from now until we have the leadership that is committed to basic education in the country.
Let me mention that we've been trying to reach the Ministry of Education. We are still trying to do so because there are certain questions only the ministry can answer, especially why we keep shifting the deadline for the provision of textbooks, which is a very vital element when it comes to teaching and learning in basic schools. And Divine, let me come back to you. So what can we do to remedy the situation? Like I asked in my first question to you, it appears that we are experimenting a lot. Would you say that the Education Ministry and the GES do a lot of thorough research before they come out with some of these policies and interventions in our education sector? Hello, Peter.
All right, thank you, Bernice.
All right, Divine, please go ahead.
Hello, Bernice.
Divine, I can hear you. Please go ahead. Divine, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
All right, thanks. So, yes, yeah. All right, one of the things that we indeed want to encourage in the Ministry of Education is to use evidence for policy formulation. And I know a number of workshops have been done to enhance the capacity of the ministry to that effect. The ministry itself has been investing in data collection to influence their policy formulation. I know that through the EMIS data and other platforms, they have robust data on our education system in Ghana. But they have to also appreciate the fact that they also need the input, other research input from non-state actors like civil society organizations or those in the academics. And I believe when we are able to fuse these organs together, the ideas, we're able to fuse ideas from these organs together, we are able to find some trend of solution to some of the issues that we are facing. Because there are a plethora of ideas being proposed by non-state actors like civil society organizations. For instance, the issue about textbook primarily is about lack of funding, the lack of it, therefore, the lack of its supply is primarily about issue of funding. And so we have to be able to see how best we can sustainably raise money to finance education. That's one of the issues. And our proposition has always been that even some of the issues regarding education financing, since you are still in need of money to finance your educational projects and programs, you just have to also to be very efficient in the use of your educational budget, because we are seeing so many wastages in the system. And then also, aside the fact that there are wastages, we have seen the worst of it, whereby the GET fund has become at 25%. And we have been calling for its total and capping or increasing the capping to at least 50%. Bernice, am I on air?
Please, we can hear you. You are.
All right, thanks. So at least uncapping the GET fund to total uncap it, or increasing from 25% that it is currently to 50%. So when we're able to ensure that we have free resources for education in general, and then there's something also substantial left for basic education, because as it stands, the concentration, rightly well known, is on the pre-senior high school. And then expenditure on senior high school is increasing as that of the basic education expenditure is decreasing. So clearly, some of the issues that we are identifying is lack of finance. And we have to, one, as I mentioned, ensure efficient use of the limited resources in the education space, and then also ensure that some of the laws, some of the policy that are inimical to education financing, like the capping of GET fund, we uncap it or increase the capping to free resource for allocation to the education sector. So yes, there are issues that have to be addressed, and the issues are more about money. But as I mentioned, whilst you are calling for increments in education budget, you have also to be very careful to note that the increment alone does not translate into its efficient use. So one, you call for its increment, but two, you must also call for its efficient use, because the amount we are putting into it and the results we are getting, some countries do not even channel that percentage of their annual budget into education or their GDP into education, but they get more outcome than what we are putting into it. So we must be very careful, just not be calling for increments in education, but also ensure accountability in the space, so that once there are checks in place that will ensure efficient use of the limited resources that we put into the education sector, we can get a corresponding outcome for it.
Right. Thank you very much for your time here this morning. That's Dibankpe, he's research fellow at Africa Education Watch. And earlier, we heard from Peter Anti, Executive Director of the Institute for Education Studies. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. We've been having a conversation on education, the new curriculum, the lack of textbooks, the impact on public education here in Ghana. You're watching the AM show. When we come back, we'll be letting you have your say on the major issues we've been discussing here this morning: the rise in petroleum products, the rise in transport fares, and also about what you feel about our education system, especially at the KG and primary levels. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Do stay. Thank you for staying here on the AM show. Before we let you have your say on the major topics we've been discussing today, thankfully, we've been joined by the PRO of the Ministry of Education, Kwesi Kwarteng. Hello, Kwesi. Thank you so much for joining the program. So there are a few things we discussed earlier that I would like you to respond to. First off is why we keep shifting the deadline when it comes to providing textbooks for the new curriculum for basic schools.
Okay, very well. Thank you, and a very good morning to you and your listeners. Yes, so we admit that there has been some delays. If you like it, you may call it some undue delays with regards to the provision of the textbooks, of which the Ministry of Education and the Minister of Education fully takes responsibility for it. Of course, at the end of the day, we know that there may be one or two reasons that has probably occasioned the delay. For instance, if you look at some point, I mean, you were all in this country when we heard some publishers initially brought some books that contain some sensitive elements relating to certain tribes that I will leave unmentioned, I'll leave unnamed now. And so at some point, the Minister of Education had to set up a quality assurance team to review the books on a number of times. At some point, two procurement processes may come in, and then finally, the contract has been signed between the ministry and the publishers to provide the book within a space of 120 days, which is even a fundamental term of the contract. But of course, I mean, beyond all the reasons that may be given as having been or partly responsible for the delays, I will say that all of them will not be justifiable absolutely. And the most important thing is that it is still the burden and the duty of the ministry to provide the textbooks for our students. And so whichever way we admit the delays, we take responsibility for the delays, and then we have assured and will continue to assure Ghanaians that, consequent to even before this conversation, you realize that we had issued a press out. I think it was the 20th of May when we said that the contract between our publishers and the student and the ministry has actually been finalized, and based on the terms of it, they are bound within 120 days to provide the text. But I think before I land on that, let me reiterate that even though textbooks is very essential and very useful within our discourse, if we look at the context of this curriculum, the standard-based curriculum, it is not entirely textbook-centered as it was before. This curriculum is not the textbook-centered. Within this curriculum, textbooks are supplementary reading materials that probably assist our students or our pupils in the home. I'm sure it is the more reason why, even though the ministry probably envisages some delays, probably from our publishers and other things, and some administrative delays, we were quite proactive in securing over 150,000 resource packs, that is teachers and learners resource packs, for our teachers to also be able to assist in the classroom. So it is not as though that even in the absence of the textbooks, there are no materials that the teachers are using. But of course, I mean, it is crucial.
All right. Okay, Mr. Kwarteng, so you've spoken about resource materials which have been given to teachers, but largely the students or the pupils would rely on the textbooks, like you said, for supplementary studies and extra studies. One would have thought that this quality assurance you mentioned as part of being one of the reasons for the delay would have happened before the new curriculum was introduced. In hindsight, would you say that we actually rushed in introducing and implementing this particular curriculum? Because it's been almost 3 years, if my memory serves me right, we've been waiting for the textbooks.
In the word which introduces textbooks before the curriculum is implemented. The implementation of...
Mr. Kwarteng, please permit me so that you get my question right. I'm not saying that you would have introduced the textbooks, but the textbooks would have been ready so that once the curriculum is rolled out, the textbooks can go along with it. But here we have a case where quality assurance is even coming in more than a year after the curriculum was introduced. And that's why I'm saying, wouldn't it have been okay to ensure that every material needed for the rollout will be ready so that once we roll it out, we can just attach the complementary textbooks and other materials for easy teaching and learning?
Yeah, I believe you have a point, except to say that the rolling of a curriculum is not an event. It's a process which includes after the rollout. I'm sure there are some reviews. There are some discussions on how far the curriculum has been rolled, and of course, I mean, there is accompanied materials that probably complements the curriculum, which includes the textbook. I mean, what is more important is that the ministry has not run away from taking responsibility from the delays. What we are just doing is to be re-echoing this whole conversation about the delays in the textbooks. I mean, it's been over 2 years now. Of course, I mean, initially when the curriculum was implemented, remember that just subsequent to that, almost a full year, whole economic activities everywhere was standstill. And our publishers were unable, I mean, partly due to COVID. And our publishers within that space could not, at some point, even the training of our teachers could not be finalized. So even though on paper, you may see the date of the implementation of the curriculum as this, it was not even finalized in absolute terms. Because look at, for instance, the Common Core Curriculum, for instance, which was introduced at the JHS level. It was just this year, at the beginning of this year, that we finished training of our teachers, because you realize that the space of 1 year during the COVID time, you couldn't convert all the teachers at a place and then, finish the training. But what is most important? The most important thing is that at the end of the day, ministry takes responsibility that there has been that delay. I'm landing. At the end of the day, contract has been signed for publishers to produce the textbooks. Even beyond that, it is not as though there has been assurances and failed assurances and promises and failed promises. As I speak with you, through the support of UNESCO, the ministry has been able to even distribute the English language textbooks to largely all schools in Ghana. So it is not as though we are indifferent about the situation and we do not want to get the textbooks there. Some have been supplied. The others to the publishers are bound within 120 days, as at I think May 20th or so, to supply the textbooks, which ends somewhere around September, where we are very sure that since the contracts are signed and there is a fundamental term of the contract, the textbooks will be provided to the various schools.
All right, Mr. Kwarteng, let's move away from the curriculum and let me take your brief response to this issue raised by the Institute for Education Studies. I spoke to its executive director a while ago, Peter Anti. Now, they are concerned that the Ministry of Education appears to be sidelining the Ghana Education Service when it comes to its operations. And I'll give you a few examples they cite. They cite the school calendar, and they say that for some time now, we've been experiencing an erratic academic calendar, which is uncharacteristic of our pre-tertiary education sector. The GES has been responsible for the school academic calendar all these years. However, recently, the Ministry of Education set up a committee to produce what they said was going to be a long-lasting, stable academic calendar. The end result of this decision is a matter of public record. They also cite the recruitment of heads, and they say documents available to them reveal that far-reaching decisions were made on the recruitment of heads for newly completed STEM schools. And this, they say, was resisted by teacher unions. Although the ministry refuted this claim, there's enough documentation that points to the fact that NAGRAT was right in its claim. Let me just take your response on this particular issue. What exactly... Hello?
Let me say that I am very surprised that upon all the researches that I faced to, they fail to acknowledge and appreciate that there is a changing dynamic when it comes to education management in Ghana. And that as I speak to you, there is a statutory legislation that undergirds or underpins the management of education in Ghana. And I was hoping that, with how IFES has been operating when it comes to research and other things, probably they would have also referred to that document. That today, as I speak with you, there is Education Bodies Regulatory Act that more or less has created other agencies responsible for some of the activities that were initially undertaken by the Ghana Education Service. So let me give you an example. If we look at the schools inspectorates, for instance, NASIA, initially, it was just a unit under the Ghana Education Service, which was occupying just a room under the Ghana Education Service. That was responsible for schools inspection and other stuff. Today, as I speak with you, it's a fully fledged agency with a Director General managing the affairs of schools inspectorate. Again, you look at an agency like the National Teaching Council, which was just a unit with the Ghana Education Service. Today, when it comes to the regulation of over 350,000 teachers across the country, it is no longer entirely the responsibility of the Ghana Education Service per se, but also, and now, it is the responsibility of the National Teaching Council. Initially, we had the Ghana, we had even just TVET, about 49 of the schools, all being regulated by the Ghana Education Service. Today, as I speak with you, there is a new TVET service, just like the Ghana Education Service. The Ghana TVET service has also been established with the Director General and deputies regulating almost 200 TVET schools. So if you are in Ghana Education Service, or if you are an observer and you do not make reference to the Education Regulatory Bodies Act, which has caused or created some level of deficiency, of course, to ensure effectiveness and efficiency in the running of education management in Ghana, you may think that the Ministry of Education, when performing their oversight responsibility and making sure that there is indeed checks and balances, there is indeed separation of powers, which are all principles which are upheld by the very principles of our Constitution, you may think that the Ministry of Education is infiltrating in the Ghana Education Service. Now, let's even look at the examples that Peter cited. You may take all these examples one by one, and you realize that these are all issues that we've already responded to. I am surprised that when he was making his argument, he never responded to, he never cited to the responses that was given by the ministry. Now, let's look at school calendar, for instance. Yes, initially, it was the prerogative of the Ghana Education Service. But today, we have the Ghana TVET service also on board. Against the backdrop of the incoherence and the unharmonization, largely occasioned by the distortion caused by COVID within our academic space, the Minister for Education said that, well, there is a new service on board. So you now have two services, all of them regulating Ghanaian students. So let's form a ministerial committee on academic calendar so that you come out with a comprehensive calendar that addresses the distortions in the calendar. How do you call that an infiltration? But this was a job which was initially done by the Ghana Education Service. Today we have the TVET service on board. So are you saying that Ghana Education Service should also now maybe dictate or make provisions for students within the TVET space? Obviously, no. Again, let's look at recruitment of heads. I mean, clearly, we came out to debunk that. And at no point will the minister or the ministry make recruitment for GES students. It has never been within the domain of the minister or the ministry, and we cannot do that. It's clear that it was GES that appointed their own head teachers. I mean, you cannot rely on a meeting where you saw a draft document which has no heading, which had no reference to the ministry or even the Ghana Education Service, to say that just because you saw a document circulating where somebody has written draft document that proposal by a committee to appoint headmasters, to say that based on that, it means that the ministry was interfering in the ESO. And consequently,
Mr. Partey,
yeah, I'm listening to you.
Yes, point well noted. We appreciate that you can make time to be with us.